my name is Karen O'Connor. I'm a professional singing teacher and the writer of SingWise.com, and today I'm going to talk about tongue tension. Tongue tension is a really common complaint among singers. Today I'm going to talk about its causes, how to recognize its many possible signs and symptoms, and then some solutions for reducing, eliminating, and preventing it. I'm going to stick with tension specific to the tongue today, and then discuss other types of tensions in future videos. Sometimes it's pretty evident when the tongue is overly tense. Whenever there's localized pain or discomfort, tongue tension is pretty easy to diagnose, although it may be a bit challenging to identify which area of the tongue is being affected. Oftentimes, however, it's a bit more insidious than that, and it may go overlooked by the singer who has poor kinesthesia or by the teacher who's not paying really close attention or who isn't really well studied in this issue. Unlike other musical instruments, of which all the playable components are visible and technique is readily seen, much of the vocal instrument is hidden from view while it's being played. So that means that we have to look extra closely and sometimes at other parts in order to determine precisely what's going on. Some lesser known signs of tongue tension may include a troughing of the tongue down the central crease. Some creasing may be normal depending on the individual's anatomy, but a really deep groove likely indicates that tongue tension is present. A dipping of the tongue in the middle, which gives the tongue sort of a spoon or ladle-like appearance, that generally indicates that there's tension at the base of the tongue. A narrowing of the tongue this way. A tongue that is relaxed is generally fat and wide. A scalloped appearance around the outer edges of the tongue, which indicates hypertonicity of the tongue muscles while at rest. The scalloped appearance forms when the tongue presses into the inside surfaces of the teeth for long periods of time. A tongue that does not fill up the entire mouth space while at rest and while the mouth is closed. Speech-language pathologists suggest that the portion of the tongue immediately behind the tip will naturally position itself right on the alveolar ridge behind the upper front teeth, while the body of the tongue will line the roof of the mouth while we're at rest. If the tongue is only filling up the back half of the mouth, or if it's filling up only the bottom portion sitting at the floor of the mouth, then that indicates tension. Another sign of tongue tension is a tongue that flattens or retracts excessively during the singing of vowels, and especially while singing higher pitches. This usually indicates that the singer is trying to use the root of the tongue to depress the larynx or to stabilize the larynx into a lower to neutral position, especially for registration purposes. Rigidity or an excessive lowering of the suprahyoid muscles here in the soft spot beneath the chin, here. Some of these muscles are intertwined with tongue movement because the tongue root, the larynx, and these muscles all share a common attachment to the hyoid bone. During silent breathing, there should be no movement whatsoever here. During speaking or singing, while we're articulating the different sounds in our languages, there may be a little bit of movement, but we shouldn't be feeling a lot of downward pressure here and a lot of tension and rigidity. It should remain soft while we're speaking and singing. A retracting or flattening of the tongue during inhalation. This may also indicate that the singer's breathing technique is inefficient or incorrect. And then finally, a tongue that is sluggish when it comes to articulation. It just doesn't seem to want to move quickly enough, which causes the consonants to separate the vowels rather than join or connect them, which in turn makes legato singing nearly impossible. This slowness can also cause unwanted transitional sounds, which can muddy resonance and clarity of diction. That's because when the tongue is held rigid or tense, it loses its flexibility and its velocity capabilities. With regard to tongue tension, there are also some purely auditory clues that singers and their teachers should be listening for. And these can include a gagged sound, which may indicate that the tongue body is bunching up in the throat space, distortions of the vowel's resonance or clarity. There's a loss of integrity of the vowel, especially upon the introduction of consonants. Problems with pitch accuracy, with intonation and registration, and this may indicate that the tongue root is putting pressure on the larynx, which in turn is preventing it from being able to rock or pivot or tilt for registration. A nasality, especially when it's accompanied by a forward thrusting jaw or an overly high tongue, which can force some nasality. And as I mentioned earlier, a sluggishness when it comes to the articulation of consonants, especially those consonants that require the tongue tip to be able to rapidly move to and away from that at-rest position behind the lower front teeth. Today I'm going to give you some exercises and stretches that you can use to help relax and loosen a tense tongue. However, I want you to bear in mind that these are really just band-aid solutions. They are only going to provide temporary relief of your symptoms. The long-term solution to chronic tongue tension, the most effective solution, and what will ultimately prevent it from returning, is to get to the root cause of what is causing this tongue tension, whatever that might be, and then deal with it appropriately. And this may include learning how to properly form our vowels and consonants, learning to use the tongue muscles with the right degree or amount of strength or contraction when articulating our speech sounds, or chewing our food, moving food around in our mouths, or whatever purposes we might use the tongue for. Not engaging extraneous muscles, muscles that are not necessary for the given task. Learning to find an independence of jaw, tongue, and larynx function. Now these structures are inextricably linked, so tension or misalignment in one may easily trickle down or transfer to another. Correcting postural habits and misalignments, and that may include that of the cervical spine, the jaw, and even dental problems. Postural problems can lead to nerve pain, either irritation of the nerve itself or referred pain from other structures that share a common nerve supply with the tongue. And then finally, addressing the emotional and psychological stress that can cause us to hold our tension in our tongues throughout the day and night. Tongue tension is actually something that I started struggling with a couple years ago. I would notice that I'd be walking through a store or making dinner or lying in bed, and then I would notice that the tongue was bunching up in the back of my mouth or pushing really, really firmly down in the floor of the mouth. And so whenever I've noticed those symptoms, I immediately reset my tongue's posture, and then I use my go-to strategies for relieving the tension. My first exercise to suggest is a massage of the longitudinal muscles that run along the entire tongue at the sides. With freshly washed hands, you're going to grab the tongue as far back as you can, and you're going to pinch it between the thumb and the index finger, and you're going to slide those forward. If you want to massage the superior muscles, you can go up a little higher, or the inferior muscles go a little bit lower. And you'll do that a few times, and you'll notice it feels like a really good massage there if you've got some tension. A second exercise that I like to use involves sort of finding the pressure points in the tongue and using that to trigger a release of the tongue tension. With the tongue hanging over the lower lip, you're going to gently bite down in the center of the tongue, and at the same time you're going to take your thumb and press into the floor of the mouth here to release the tension in here. You'll do that for 30 to 60 seconds. Now I'm sure you don't want to actually watch me do that for 30 to 60 seconds, but what you'll probably feel here is a little bit of fight with these suprahyoid muscles as they start to release that tension. One of my most favorite exercises to do involves slowly alternating between inhaling through the nose with a nice yawn stretch in the throat and a little bit of a lift of the zygomatic muscles in here, and then exhaling silently with the tongue sticking out as far as possible, hanging over the chin. Now I like to actually tuck it in here because I don't like to have a wet chin. And when I do that, I feel a really nice stretch in the back of my tongue. I also get lipstick on my chin. When singing, we want to closely monitor our tongue's behavior, its positions and shapes. This is best done using a mirror because we tend not to have very good proprioception when it comes to the tongue. We're not always aware of its actions or positions or shapes inside the mouth. We can retrain the tongue and monitor its behavior by doing some more inhaling and singing or speaking with the mouth open in front of a mirror. I like to have my students inhale and exhale and watch what happens with the tongue. The tongue should not move from that at-rest position. And then when we go to retrain the tongue to be able to stay in a better position for our vowels, we can inhale with the tongue set in that vowel position, and then exhale again with the tongue in that same vowel position and closely monitor its behavior. And then inhale with the vowel position of the tongue, and then speak or sing that vowel and watch that that behavior doesn't change. We can try this on several pitches as well to watch what happens, especially as we go a little bit higher in the scale. Another little exercise that I like to use involves placing the tongue tip between the lips and then humming a scale or the melody of a vocal phrase. The tongue tip should not retreat into the mouth space when we're doing that exercise. If it does, it's a naughty tongue and we need to retrain it. As for the proper positioning of the tongue, as a general rule, we want to have the tip of the tongue positioned behind the lower front teeth for the formation of all vowels and most consonants. We don't want the tongue pressing into those teeth, but we also don't want it pulling away. Now, depending on the individual's anatomy, especially if the singer has a particularly short tongue, a little bit of a separation, a little gap there might be appropriate. It would actually be more tension-inducing to try to force that singer to keep the tongue tip more forward like that. Having the tongue tip positioned behind the lower front teeth is not necessarily a guarantee that the rest of the tongue behind that tip is behaving appropriately. It's possible to have that tongue tip forward, but to have an overly retracted or flattened tongue. So be really mindful of that. Pay close attention. An even trickier skill for many singers to master is learning how to apply an appropriate amount of muscular strength to their articulation tasks. Many singers also misdirect their strength, recruiting more muscles than are necessary for the actual task. Let's take an analogy of carrying a coffee mug. Most of us will tend to actually grip that coffee mug. So let's say we've got some hot coffee in there. I don't actually drink coffee, but let's say there's some hot liquid in there. So most of us would tend to want to really grip firmly, and then we would also engage all the muscles along our arm because we want to prevent that hot liquid from sloshing out and either burning us or making a huge mess. So then what happens is we get like a death grip on our fingers here, and I can just feel everything down, all the tension all the way along my arm here. My wrist is actually getting sore and my knuckles are probably getting white. So a lot of singers do this when it comes to singing as well. They engage more muscles than they actually need to for the given task. So if we're articulating the consonant L, for example, the tongue tip should just move very, very rapidly and very lightly between the at-rest position behind the lower front teeth and the alveolar ridge where it touches. We shouldn't feel a ton of tension. It should just be a very easy movement. The tongue is not that heavy, just like our coffee mug is not nearly as heavy as we seem to believe it is. So what we want to do is we want to just lightly tap that. And then when we reintroduce voicing, we don't want to add any more muscular tension to that tongue. La 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 la. La 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 la. It really shouldn't feel any different. Also, the jaw should not be moving rapidly up and down along with the tongue. La 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 la. It's not necessary because the L is formed just with the tip of the tongue. So we wouldn't be using good economy of movement if we're moving our jaw along with it. And then that's just going to bring about lots of tensions in our jaw. Tension that's going to trickle from the tongue all the way down to the jaw and possibly into the larynx. So get to the root cause of your chronic tongue tension and find a long-term solution. If necessary, hire a singing teacher to help you do this, a singing teacher who is well studied in vocal diagnostics. It takes a long time sometimes to retrain our muscles to develop new muscle memory and new neural pathways to be able to work appropriately with the right amount of tension and find the right postures. But I promise you that that short-term tediousness and vigilance will have long-term benefits, and you'll be so much happier in the end and so much more comfortable. I hope this video has been informative and helpful for you. Please feel free to leave comments below, message me at the SingWise Facebook page, or email me at Karen@singwise.com. That's Karyn@singwise.com. I'll see you next time.